Now, Labour are pledging to fund their policies on the NHS and school breakfast clubs by cracking down on tax avoiders.
The Shadow Chancellor will announce the plans later today, which she says will help to raise £5 billion a year. Well, Rache Reeves is here with us now. Morning.
Good morning.
£5 billion a year. Is that enough?
Well, the tax gap at the moment between what we should bring in tax and what is actually brought in is around £36 billion. But the head of the National Audit Office said that it is reasonable, if you properly resource His Majesty's Revenue and Customs, to bring in an additional £6 billion. And we're determined to do that. The government have said they can bring in another billion. We think, let's bring in the whole £6 billion, because we know public services are on their knees, and we will use that money for 2 million additional appointments every year to clear the backlog on the hospital waiting lists, to have breakfast clubs at all primary schools, and also those emergency dental appointments, which are so important, especially with the number of kids who have never seen a dentist. So this is to fund what I believe are the nation's priorities by cracking down on tax avoidance and making sure that the tax code is properly complied with.
And in order to do that, you're suggesting that you will put more bodies basically doing the work to make the system more efficient. That's not going to happen quickly, is it? That could take years.
You can ramp it up, actually, pretty quickly. At the start, you might need to bring in some extra resource, but then you need to train people up within the government to do this work. But this isn't rocket science. Previous governments have managed to close that tax gap, that it's called. The last Labour government did it, and actually the coalition government, the Conservative-led coalition government, did it. But the government have taken its eye off the ball on this, and as a result, last year alone, the tax gap increased by £5 billion. That's £5 billion that could have gone into our frontline public services, but didn't, because the government aren't working hard enough to make sure that everyone pays their fair share of tax.
Just to say one thing, the latest tax gap we have here is 4.8%, so that's quite low by historical standards, but actually it was 7.5 in 2005 when Labour were in power. Yes,
and we managed to bring it down. It then fell further under the coalition government, but last year alone, the tax gap increased by £5 billion. And that is money. You know, when everyone else is seeing their tax go up, council tax going up, the tax thresholds frozen, so more people being dragged into paying tax, it is right then that we make sure that everybody who should be paying tax is paying tax. And one of the specific things that we're announcing today is that the government's plans that they announced in March about non-DOMs, they said they were taking our policy. Well, it turns out they've taken it but left a load of loopholes in it. And so if you are a non-DOM, you can still get out of paying inheritance tax. And in the first year of their policy, there's a 50% discount. We don't get 50% discounts on our taxes. People who go out and work today, teachers, plumbers, doctors, nurses, they don't get a 50% discount. Why should some of the wealthiest people in the country get that discount? We would abolish that and we would put that money into frontline public services where it belongs.
So you're saying that your non-dom tax tightening would get more money for the government and then for public services than the Conservatives would. But isn't the fact that by adopting your policy on non-DOMs, they forced you to kind of go scrabbling down the back of the sofa, looking for extra cash like you have today with the tax avoidance? They forced you into this position.
Well, I've always said that all of the policies in Labour's manifesto and with the Labour government, if that's what we have later this year, all of our policies will be fully costed and fully funded. That's what people can expect from me as Shadow Chancellor. It's what people can expect from me if I become Chancellor of the Exchequer. The government did take some of our policies in the budget earlier this year. They say that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, so that's fine with me. I then had to go away in an orderly fashion, go through all the government documents and make sure our flagship policies around cutting NHS waiting lists, breakfast clubs at primary schools, emergency dental appointments, that those policies are still costed and funded. I'm announcing how we're doing that today with a crackdown on tax avoidance, but also strengthening the rules, ensuring that non-DOMs are paying their fair share of tax in the place that they make their home, Britain.
It must be awkward for you, though, coming on to talk about tax avoidance when at the same time Labour's deputy leader, Angela Rayner, is still facing questions about whether she paid the right amount of tax over the sale of her council home back in, 2015. We should say she insists she's done absolutely nothing wrong, but, you know, the police are still looking at this and their decision-making in the past. That is a distraction, isn't it? And could continue to be a distraction when you talk about tax.
Well, Angela's answered questions about this in quite some detail, and she's also sought additional tax and legal advice. And she is confident, I am confident, that she has paid the tax that was owed. But all this is from a decade ago, the living arrangements with her and her ex-husband before she was a Member of Parliament. This is about what a Labour government would do if we are elected later this year to bring in billions of pounds to properly fund our frontline public services. And I think that's what people want to know, whether Labour are serious about funding our public services and ensuring people pay their fair share of tax. I am determined to do both of those things.
But how confident are you that this particular issue is actually over?
Well, look, Angela is a good friend and a colleague of mine, and I have full faith and trust in her. She has answered questions about this, and I've confidence that, 10 years ago, she paid the right amount of tax when she sold her home.
Talking about what you do with the money that comes in, The Guardian this morning are saying that you and Keir Starmer are being urged to resurrect the Sure Start scheme, which lots of people will remember Gordon Brown and Tony Blair implementing to help poorer families. Is that something that you're prepared to consider?
Well, one of the things that the money that I've said that we will raise by tackling tax avoidance and cracking down on non-DOMs is to fund free breakfast clubs in all primary schools.
But that would only be part of Sure Start, wasn't it? That was a much more comprehensive strategy.
Yes, and it was a fantastic thing that helped many mums get back to work, particularly mums, but dads as well. And gave good children.
Could it be again?
Look, it was a fantastic scheme. By the time I had my children, it had already been got rid of by the Conservative government. But I know it made a big difference to the lives of very many people. There are lots of things that I would like to do, but I will always make sure our policies are fully costed and fully funded. And the breakfast clubs that we will fund will make a big difference to make sure that all children have a good start to the day and parents can take on more hours at work.
Could we see that phrase, Sure Start, in your manifesto?
Well, look, let's see when the manifesto is published. Bridget Phillipson, our Shadow Education Secretary, is absolutely committed to having a comprehensive package around childcare, because we know it's about ensuring kids get a good start to life, and it's about ensuring more mums and dads can take on work and support their families. Childcare is a massive cost. All of us that are mums and dads know that, and we want to make it a bit easier for mums and dads to balance being good parents but also taking on work.
We have talked about childcare on this programme quite recently in a lot of detail. You say there are a lot of things you'd like to do. What would you like to do about childcare?
Well, look, the breakfast clubs is a sort of a down payment on that.
Other than that, you say there's a lot of things you'd like to do, but you haven't said what they are. We know we're talking about breakfast clubs today. What's the next thing?
Well, look, I've always got to say that everything will be fully costed and fully funded. And I'm not going to start announcing policies without saying where the money's going to come from. But today, today, what we are setting out with all the money behind it is 2 million additional appointments in the NHS a year, 700,000 emergency dental appointments, as well as those free breakfast clubs for children of primary school age.
We talked a lot about tax, haven't we? And one of the things, if you we talk to friends, family, a lot of people say, working people would say, they would be happy to pay a bit more tax if the roads didn't have so many potholes, if their elderly parent could get a bed when they needed it as an emergency in hospital, if they could get a GP appointment. What do you say to those people who say, well, I wouldn't mind paying a bit more tax? You're focusing on very, very wealthy people here, but what about the workers who say that?
Well, look, we are still in the middle of a cost of living crisis, and the tax burden on working people is at a 70-year high. In fact, by the end of the next few years, the average family are going to be paying £870 more in tax. So working people are being taxed a lot today. What the announcement today is saying is that I don't want to tax working people more, but people who are not paying their fair share of tax should be. And I think it's right to crack down on tax avoidance and make sure that the tax code is complied with, and making sure that non-DOMs are paying their fair share of tax before we come to working people and say pay even more. That's not what I would like to do. I would like the tax burden on working people to be lower, but you can only achieve that if you're bringing in all of this tax that's going missing because of tax avoidance and a failure to comply properly with the tax code. That is going to be my focus, making sure that everybody is paying their fair share of tax rather than increasing the burden even more on working people.
A lot of your members, a lot of voters, a lot of people watching right now will say they would like you to say, well, let's tax richer people more. If not working people, tax richer people.
Well, look, non-doms are some of the wealthiest people in this
I'm
country.
not talking about people who are not paying at the moment. I'm talking about, income tax on UK residents, richer people.
No, that's not my priority. My priority is
people
making
are saying
sure...
it could be, should be.
Well, they'll have a chance to express their views at the ballot box, but this is about ensuring that those with the broadest shoulders are paying their fair share of tax and making sure that people who make their home in Britain pay their taxes here. That's a very important principle. Everybody else that goes out to work today will be paying their tax. If you make Britain your home, you should be contributing to public services here, and that's what a Labour government will ensure.
Rache Reeves, great to have you here on The Sofa. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.